again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I'm Maddie K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 204. And this episode, we brought someone with us. Well, something with us, but really, it's a constant companion. It's huge. It's heavy. It's the GIGASWORD. We are talking about the recently released metroidvania puzzle platformer GIGASWORD from Studio Hybrid Games. And to join us in that conversation, we have the lead developer, solo developer, the entirety of Studio Hybrid, Jack Breen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're so excited to have you. From getting to chat at PAX East, playing like an hour of your demo. I think it's the longest I sat at any demo the whole weekend.
You got lost in it.
I really did. Like, it's one of those moments where I hold the controller and I play for 5 minutes and go, oh no, this game's going to be a problem. Of course, thanks to Acapara for giving us review keys, which is awesome. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was awesome having you guys come to the booth that day for PAX East. Just the reaction and the passion for what GIGASWORD is. It was awesome to see, and we had such a great time there those 4 days.
It definitely was a highlight for us. GIGASWORD is the first sort of full commercial release for Studio Hybrid for you. You released a few games previously. They can be found on itch, like Truck You and Jawbreaker, which were both a lot of fun. Please, everybody check it out. Pay what you want. They're a lot of fun, but what sort of led you to making GIGASWORD?
First of all, it's awesome that you went and played both those games. Jawbreaker was my first game, and then Truck You, that was technically the first game I released, but I actually just made that one to like practice exporting a game to itch.io. I was like, okay, I just need to make something quickly to just figure out how this actually works.
The track that you made for that is a banger. I was having a lot of fun with it. I was jamming out.
That's awesome, thank you. Both those games, one was in October and one was in December, and I think that was 2017 that I did that. So
that's what I saw on the dates, yeah.
Crazy. GIGASWORD, I had the idea for actually around the same time. The story that I like to tell is I was in my friend's dorm. This was probably 2015 or 2016, and he's a big Berserk fan. And at the time, and everybody assumes I'm a big Berserk fan, which like now I am, but I got into it because of GIGASWORD, because everybody kept asking me if I've seen Berserk, and I was like, I knew what it was, but I had never seen it. But he was a big Berserk fan. He was like, nobody's really done like a platformer with like Buster Sword centric combat. You know, you should do something like that. He was kind of joking. And the idea for the main mechanic came to me pretty much immediately because I have Zelda brain. So all my ideas have to do with like, not necessarily puzzles, but just making it, I guess in that sense, it was me trying to put a puzzle spin on it. Immediately I was like, okay, well, if you got this big heavy sword, then maybe you can put it down and then you jump higher. So I wrote that down, and I think I made a quick prototype so I would remember it. Then I did the other stuff and whatever, and there were just other games I was trying to work on. I was always biting off more than I could chew with game ideas. I was always just trying to make something that I was just not at the skill level to make yet. But in 2019, I was like, all right, I think I'm ready, because GIGASWORD, the concept was a manageable Metroidvania, which of course, I'd like to think that scope creep didn't hit me too hard, but like it definitely hit this project to some degree. The plan was still essentially what the game ended up being. You know, a Metroidvania with like 5 or 6 areas. Each area would have different ways that the sword could be used. Where the scope ended up increasing was originally there wasn't going to be really any cutscenes or really much of a story at all, and there weren't going to be as many bosses. But other than that, it pretty much stayed the same. But so back in 2019, I was like, GIGASWORD feels like an idea that I'm ready to make, so I just kind of went for it. And I definitely designed a lot of it like along the way. Once I started showing it to people in, you know, not just friends, but started bringing it to local events in Boston within 2020, the response was great. I kind of just found that like, okay, I've got something here. I really love the idea. It seems like other people are really starting to latch onto it. So I went for it. And then that turned into a 6-year thing. And now here we are.
When we talked about this with you back at PAX East, something that you said was one of the first things you worked on was getting sort of the movement of Ezra, the protagonist of the game, with the sword to be satisfying, to be fun. How far into that development was it before you started showing it to people? Like, how close to what it is present day was it at that point?
So the first time I ever showed it off, it was January of 2020, and I had started it like in the spring of 2019. The first demo that I brought to an event, there weren't even any enemies. It was just Ezra, and then there were some puzzles that you could solve. Most of those puzzles ended up being reused in the Forgotten Waterway area, so like the kind of tutorial section that you make your way through, it was a lot of that stuff. Getting him to feel good to control was my first objective. That was probably most of what 2019 was about. And I also kind of had to decide like how the sword dropping mechanic worked, because originally I had the idea to let the player stab the sword in all 4 directions. So it was like you could stab it to the left or right, like into a wall, and then like stand on it. That just didn't really end up working out. Like I tested it, and it wasn't necessary. Basically,
There's no novel applications that you couldn't already have by putting the sword down and jumping ledge to ledge.
Exactly, yeah. I could think of like one puzzle idea to do that with, and then the same thing with stabbing it above you. Like you could put it in the ceiling. And my idea was like, if there's a bridge underneath you that like drops out on like a timer, then you have to like stab the sword and hang in the ceiling until the bridge comes back up, and then you let go and keep running. Those are the only ideas I had, so I just scrapped that idea.
That makes a lot of sense. The downward stab that is in the final game has such a sense of momentum and gravity to it. If it went in any other direction, it would lose out on that feeling of momentum and weight. And there is already a sense of, I want to say, patience in the gameplay here. Not quite like a pattern-based, but it makes me think of old school Castlevania, where there is a wind-up to what you're doing. You feel the crack of the whip on that, the same with the swing of the sword. So, yeah, that's just sort of putting a hat on a hat where you have to wait for a different bridge.
Yeah, and definitely that deliberate nature of things is what players pointed out early on, and kind of what I caught on to as I was making it was like, this is going to be a very different kind of not only Metroidvania, but a very different kind of action game. This is not Metroid Dread, where it's super snappy and fast-paced and reactive. It's like, if you're gonna swing your sword, you need to be sure that you're making the right decision in doing so. And also, it was important for me to try to make the controls and the mechanics, I guess, as simple as possible. Like, I didn't want it to be boring, of course, but I also wanted to emulate the feel of like an NES game or a Super Nintendo game. Because I think some people go into GIGASWORD, like, I've seen this a little bit with the reviews that are coming in now that it's out, where like, some people think that they're getting like this great sword action game where it's like, oh, I thought there were going to be a bunch of different move sets and combos you can do. And it's like, that would be cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like, that's not really what GIGASWORD is about. It's like, if you look at it as it would relate to something like Zelda, it wasn't super important to me to have all these different ways for you to be able to essentially do the same thing, which would just be attacking people. So it's like, you have your jump attack, you have your downward stab, which can be used in combat. You have your normal attack, which you can combo, and then you have the spells that you unlock, and that was really all I felt like you needed, because again, it's more of a puzzle-based exploration game.
If it's good enough for Zelda 2, goddammit.
There have been a lot of Zelda 2 comparisons coming in specifically, which makes me want to replay that game, because I've actually never beaten that one, given the kind of cryptic nature of it. But yeah, somebody, I don't remember who it was, but somebody said, I think it was a Twitch streamer that I was watching, he was like, this game is like what I always wished Zelda 2 was. And I was like, that's such an amazing compliment. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, there's plenty of NES games, like games from that era, where they have that feeling where it's like, there's something really good here that is buried in all kinds of confusion. And yeah, no, I agree with you, Jack. The Zelda 2, if you don't have a guide, it is cryptic. It is obfuscated intentionally. And then localization just makes it worse. But just playing it, that's fun. And there is joy in that loop.
For sure.
Well, it's funny. This game is at the crossroads of Geoff and I's favorite genres of what if X game, but good. We cite a contemporary Infernax and like how that was like Castlevania 2, but good. But also it's at the crossroads of a game that looks like it could run on the NES, but absolutely could not run on the NES. We love those kinds of games because it kind of harkens back to this is how I remember this game feeling, right? Like even playing the new Ninja Turtles beat 'em up. It's like how I remembered Turtles in Time looking and feeling, even though obviously it wasn't as complex as Shredder's Revenge is. So the game is challenging, as any good Metroidvania should be. And I think it rides the line between challenging but fair in a way that I don't want to say that Silk Song is unfair, but it's definitely more challenging, right, than the average Metroidvania. What I love about this game is that the way you circumvent the challenge is some of the mechanics you've mentioned. Like for me, once I got the sword spark, basically there's a move that you get early on. It's one of the first ones you can unlock where you slam the sword into the ground and a trail comes off. So it's very Zelda, also inspired.
Well, because you have to be at full life to use it.
Right. what I loved about that is it made certain enemies easy mode. Not all of them, but like certain assholes who would like counter or block after the second swing, I could stand back and just fling sparks at them until they died. And I finished the second area before I realized, or almost finished the second area, before I realized that the downward slash extends your jump. It took me hours to figure that out. I was just trying to make those jumps by standing toes of steel off the edge and missing them. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing wrong? And then I noticed the propulsion of the downward slash in combat. I went, wait a minute. And I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. Of course, that makes so much sense. But I love that sense of discovery, right? That you built in like the easier way to do stuff, but you can also there are harder ways too. When you were designing this game, did you have those moments of discovery as you were designing the mechanics?
With the jump attack specifically, I don't think that I purposefully made it like had the idea of like, oh, this will let you jump further.
Yeah.
I think I just was focused on making that attack feel good to perform. And then at some point, I guess just messing with it, I must have discovered, yes, this will let you like it's specifically what it is, because I've been in the game for 7 years now, is like with the sword you can jump 2 tiles horizontally, but with that attack you can make it 3. Here's a speedrun secret for the both of you. The furthest horizontal jump that you can perform is if you don't have the sword and then you ledge hang and then you jump horizontally. He can make it 4 blocks wide. There's a secret in the garden that you can get that way. It's interesting what you mentioned about like a natural difficulty slider for the game, like getting the spells. I wanted to make sure that every enemy and every boss in the game could be beaten without those sword upgrades, without those spells.
Right.
And what's funny about that too is I still haven't done like my first full playthrough of the game because I've just been so busy. I've played every part of it, but just not start to finish. But before the game came out, I was trying to get through the whole thing and then just kept encountering bugs and stuff, so I just kept having to restart. But I made it. I played the whole thing from the start to about halfway through. Specifically, I had always been worried that the lightning wouldn't be super useful, because like I would try to use it in like boss fights and stuff, and I was like, I don't know if people are gonna like this one. It just seems kind of whatever. But playing the game in practice, like you need the lightning to beat those guys on the ceiling and stuff. Like it's way like I can't imagine not like trying to get through the game without it. So, and the same thing with the fireballs.
I mean, that's what I mean by easy mode. So the second boss, which is I believe the plant boss.
Yeah.
I had the lightning by then. It wasn't trivial, I'd say, but it definitely made it effortless to hit him, right? I still had to dodge a ton of stuff, but like I basically stood under him and shifted when certain attacks happened. Whereas if I didn't have that, then I chose that on a whim, because at that point you have like multiple choices after the first ability. I chose that one on a whim because like, oh, cool, lightning. I like lightning. And then got to that boss and went, oh shit, I can't imagine what this would have been like without it.
Slower.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I know Geoff didn't have it. This takes me to I want to lodge a formal complaint about one of the mechanics. No, I'm kidding. But like something I told Geoff earlier that I wanted to talk about, because it's something that's outside my taste, but I understand why you have it, but I'm curious what the inspiration for it was. So this game mostly has very strong metroidvania elements, feels like Zelda a little bit. There are 2 things that make it very Souls-like. When you save, the enemies come back, which is great, because respawning room to room in the Metroid games drives me bonkers sometimes. So grateful for that. But then you also have, if you collect ore in this game to upgrade your sword and to open secret passages or progress through certain parts of the game, if you die, your ore remains where you were and you have to get back to it. If you die again, it's gone. A system that's been tons of games. I hate this in my soul, because for me, I'm bad at games. And so I lose stuff a lot. I started keeping a tally of how much ore I lost, and it made me so mad I had to throw it away, like that piece of paper, because it was just making me mad. But in all seriousness, I understand why you would add a mechanic like that. But I'm curious where the inspiration is for that, because that doesn't feel like necessarily a divergence, but it's an interesting thing to mix into this game that was leaning more towards a puzzly action platformer kind of vibe.
It is originally from Dark Souls. I mean, I don't know. Historically, I don't know if Dark Souls is credited with being the first to use that mechanic, but I know that they're generally, where that comes from. My decision to put the ore drop in the game was honestly because Shovel Knight does the same thing, and there's so much Shovel Knight inspiration in this. So I was probably just looking for a way to, I guess, raise the stakes. This was around the time when I was designing Death in GIGASWORD. That was basically, and maybe this goes for anyone that's making a game like Zelda or like Metroid, where it's like that's kind of where you have to decide, like, I guess, how hard your game's going to be. Like what does the player stand to lose every time they die? Because in most Zelda games, like, you really, And I only realized this after purposefully doing the research, but there's not a lot of consequence for death in Zelda games. It's pretty much just sending you back somewhere that you were before, but you're not really losing progress. I like games where you're, not that are overly difficult, but where there's a real penalty for dying. It draws the player in, I think.
Yeah.
You know, like in Minecraft, right? Like if you die in Minecraft, it's like, that's like a night ruining event depending on like how much stuff you have or what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that's what makes it more fun is like when you're in a dark cave in Minecraft and you can't get back up and you don't even know like where your house is at this point. You're super far from home, but you have diamonds on you, right? Like that's such an exhilarating experience, and it's exhilarating because of the consequence of because of what you stand to lose. So as I've gotten older, I've grown to enjoy games that have that sense of consequence within them. I didn't want GIGASWORD to be super punishing, but I definitely wanted to kind of play with that idea.
No, and when you can stand to lose something like that, it does affect you, even if it doesn't necessarily get your pulse raised the entire time, though it can. To speak to that same second boss in the Flooded Gardens, first time I got to that boss, I had 1 health left, so I'm like, screw it, this is a scouting run. Went in, got destroyed very quickly. The save room is far enough away that you have to go through a couple spaces to get to it. Now, thus far, I have not lost any ore. I have died, but I've gotten it back every single time. And so I needed to keep that streak going. Kept going back for it. There is a portion, listeners, that you are doing some ladder jumping over spikes. I had not fallen into the spikes at any point until I needed to get to the boss room to get my ore back. All of a sudden, I was terrible at it. And then I got to the boss with 2 health that time. The first time I got back. Eventually, I got my groove back. It happened enough that I could kind of calm down. But yeah, that sense of consequence, there is a lot of deliberate here. And something that occurred to me is also desperation. Within the story, Ezra is, the way I term it is Ezra is a destined swordsman, not a master swordsman. And things like that kind of carry it out.
Yeah. I'm mostly poking fun when I've never been able to talk to the dev directly and say, why did you do this? But like genuinely, were you conscious of your influences? Were there certain targets that you were like, well, I like this game, so I want to put something similar? Or did it kind of just work out that way based on what your history is?
It was kind of half and half, I suppose. Like, definitely I was pulling from Dark Souls with, like, the dodge roll combat, from Shovel Knight, especially Shovel Knight with the music and the artwork, and then, you know, Metroid with the design. And I feel like as it went, I started to realize that this game is a lot more of a Zelda-like than it is a Metroidvania. Like, it is still a Metroidvania by definition, but I think calling it a Zelda-like probably does it more justice. For one thing, like the way that I designed the world, each area is kind of like a Zelda dungeon. The whole world is just a bunch of interconnected Zelda dungeons that you kind of revisit. The puzzle solving nature of it definitely plays into that. Once I was like 2 years into it, you know, GIGASWORD really developed its own DNA that I just started to build off of and ended up with its own kind of rules. I was figuring out what kind of game it was becoming as I was making it. But yeah, definitely at the beginning, that's when those influences were at the forefront of my mind, like thinking about, you know, how similar to Dark Souls is this going to be? How similar to Metroid is it going to be? I'd say most of that stuff was conscious, but there's plenty of subconscious design within it.
This actually kind of gets into an interesting thought. I agree with you. I think calling it a Zelda-like is a lot better, or a lot more accurate, certainly, because Zelda games are absolutely, if you wanted to argue, you know, well, fuck, everything's a Metroidvania, you find items to get to new areas. You can't get into those areas or do those things until you get the items, like a Metroidvania. Except what a Metroidvania is nowadays carries with it a different connotation. Even challenging ones, even punishing ones, have a certain feel to them that I think GIGASWORD isn't trying to ape. Zelda combat isn't big, flowy, flashy. There are things that you can do, but it is, at its core, an aspect of solving a puzzle, where the puzzle is enemy, sort of. The same way that D&D combat is just a lot of skill checks, but the skill checks can be very spectacularly described. The thought that occurs to me is anytime an indie game has to put itself out there, has to be marketed, has to sell, nowadays, everything is tags. Everything is blank meets blank. There is enough Metroidvania to what's going on. It is a 2D game. It is secret walls that you can break. It is things that you can find and upgrade to go further. Do you find that in some cases, and you were saying about some of the reviews that have been coming out, which are all over the place, I've been reading them, and I do wonder where people are coming from in what they expect, and has being called a Metroidvania helped or hindered in that effort?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's kind of what I want to experiment with going forward now that the game is out, is like kind of trying to, and I'm not a marketing expert, so I'm not really even sure how I'm going to do this, but like I feel like I need to somehow infiltrate the Zelda fan base and be like, I don't want to stop calling it a Metroidvania because it's kind of somewhere in between, right?
Right.
And my kind of hot take on the situation is that, like, kind of like what you just said, Zelda kind of is a Metroidvania. Like, if you take Zelda-like and Metroidvania and really compare them, like, I know that there are differences. I haven't thought about it long enough to really be able to articulate what those differences are.
It's a I'll know it when I see it kind of thing, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I think so, yeah. Like, for GIGASWORD, the world feels Metroid. The puzzles feel Zelda. There was one review on Steam where someone was complaining about the amount of keys in this game. They're like, all you find are small keys, and then you beat a boss and you get a bigger key. Like, it's bullshit. And it's like,
Have you never played A Link to the Past?
you know, exactly. Like, and I can respect the opinion, whatever. Like, it's whatever. If you don't like keys, then I guess it's probably not the game for you. But what did they expect? Like, why is this a problem? But like you're pointing out, like if they went into this expecting Silk Song or something that leans way more towards Metroid than it does towards Zelda, then I suppose that's going to be a complaint. But if you get somebody who's really into Zelda, they're not even going to notice, because that's what you do in Zelda. You get a bunch of keys and unlock doors and stuff. So that's where my design philosophy came from when it came to puzzles. So yeah, it does kind of sit somewhere in between the two genres. And my goal when making it wasn't to try to choose one or the other. And I honestly wasn't really thinking about the trappings of any certain genre when I was making it. My mindset about GIGASWORD was like, I have this idea, I'm passionate about it, I think it works, I think it makes sense, I don't really care what it's called, just kind of is what it is. I think for that reason, it might just take some time for whoever the target audience is for them to just find their way to it. And I understand that when you initially release a game, that's just kind of the most tumultuous period where you've got all kinds of people from all different walks of life coming in to just see if they like it, and they leave their thoughts and whatever, and then they disperse. And then after the smoke settles, after the first couple of months or whatever, you're just left with the people that are really passionate about it.
I mean, I think part of it also is, I don't think I realized till this call that it was a mix of Zelda and Metroid, right? Which are two of my favorite genres, and two genres that I don't think have been mixed very often, right? Because when I think about a Metroidvania, it's right, you're right. Like, I think about hidden walls, but I don't always necessarily think about puzzles. There's stuff to solve, but not quite like this is. Like, I love walking into a room and going, well, how am I getting up there with my sword? Or I know how to get up there. How do I get my sword up there? Which is like a ton of the puzzles. And I think that kind of also makes it feel more Zelda, in the sense that you're not trying to blast through it quickly. There's a pensiveness to it, a moment to stop and think, which I really love. So you're not rushing through, which matches the combat, right? The combat is very slow and methodical, and have to plan, and like, can I get 2 swipes in on this one before he attacks back? Not to completely change the topic, but you mentioned the music earlier, and I have to talk about it because, like, talking about a game that we both love, like Shovel Knight, the compositions for this game were incredible and absolutely evoke not necessarily that specific game, but that era of indie game, right? Everyone who wanted to make games that sounded somewhere between 8 and 16-bit chiptune. How did that come together?
The music for this game is all over the place. What I mean by that is Olastasia's boss theme is a song I wrote in 2015.
Wow.
A bunch of them that were originally for different projects. So that boss theme was for this top-down Zelda game that I was trying to make at the time, which didn't end up going anywhere because I was a beginner. Then there was a different top-down Zelda game that I was trying to make in 2017, and I wrote that one. I got a bit further with, so I actually wrote a lot of music for that game. The project itself I scrapped, but the music I always really loved. So some of the songs from that one are the high wall music, although I added to that song later. Years later, I added like an entire second half to that song. The monastery theme was from that project, so that's another old song. So then when I started GIGASWORD, I wrote most of the other music, I suppose, and was kind of just writing as I developed. And then I had like a big section this year towards the end of development where there was a lot of cutscene specific music that was still left to do that I couldn't write until the cutscenes were done. So I ended up writing like 10 songs in like 4 weeks or something like that, like right at the end of the game.
Real.
To tie this back to the puzzles and stuff, and this plays into kind of the slow methodical nature of the game, which I did consciously lean into as development progressed. So I listen to a lot of heavy metal, and I love writing like boss themes and just like stuff that sounds like Mega Man music, right? Like when you're in the outskirts at the beginning of the game or in the forest, like that music is very like what you would expect from like Mega Man or like an action platformer or something like that. It's much more upbeat and has a very distinct melody to it. But as I was making GIGASWORD, I realized like if you call that like Shovel Knight music, right? Which I love the Shovel Knight soundtrack. That's where the inspiration comes from. That's why I made the music sound the way it does. I was like, I don't really think that it would be useful or appropriate to have music like that in the main areas where people are trying to do puzzle solving. I feel like it would be too distracting. So I had to challenge myself to write more ambient songs for the main areas and then go hard on the boss themes to kind of balance it out. Overall, I had a blast writing the music for this game. I've been writing music for most of my life. I started working with chiptune music specifically when I was in high school. I use a software called FamiTracker, which is the same software that they used in Shovel Knight, which is how I found it. So I've just had a bunch of experience writing chiptune at this point. It was just an easy direction for me to go. It matches the vibe and the art style of the game. I'm sure I'll make more games that have FamiTracker music. It's just where I'm comfortable working. Like I've made music using other software before, but growing up, some of my favorite soundtracks from old school games were like Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project has one of my favorite chiptune soundtracks, and obviously the old Metroid games and the old Zelda games. Anything Mega Man related I love the music in those games, so it's that inspiration shining through basically.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, having played some of your previous games and getting to kind of hear the evolution of influence here, certainly your earlier stuff, the first thing that came to mind for me was, well, a little bit of the Folan brothers as far as just like, let's see how many notes we can fit in here, baby. But also as far as tone and how it moves, like the Konami sound. So hearing you say the Manhattan Project being one of the influences or being an early love for you makes a lot of sense. Konami on the NES really knew how to get a good chunky rock sound. Like a lot of Mega Man games can rock. Like Wily 1 and Mega Man 2 is of course one of those chiptune songs that everyone can cite and go, oh my God, this is amazing and heroic and cool. But it doesn't necessarily rock the way that you think it does. This makes a lot of sense as far as influence goes for you.
I mean, between mentioning the Manhattan Project, which is like such a pull, and one of my favorite games growing up, Shovel Knight, which Geoff and I never shut up about. Like, I feel like, Jack, you and I were destined to be friends because this game is like DNA coded for me to love. And it's just always fun to hear where influence comes from, right? I mean, Geoff and I have a saying on the show, which is that every game is somebody's favorite, right? Good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. Influence, especially beyond just having a favorite, like the things that influence you. Not that Manhattan Project's a bad game. It's a great beat 'em up. And if you've never played that NES game, you should go play it right now.
It's a latter-day NES game, so it gets forgotten. It's really good.
Right. To that end, it's always amazing to me where people draw influence from, because even like you were saying before about how you like Dark Souls, but that wasn't like, I want to be like a Dark Souls, I want to add this thing. It was more because you wanted a way to add difficulty and stress and pressure, especially since you're a solo dev and you're doing everything. I have to ask, like, clearly you just seem super talented to me because I can't do any of this stuff. Was there a specific thing when working on this that really stopped you in your tracks, or like you struggled with while trying to make? Sounds like it wasn't easy on any level to begin with, but was there like a part of making this game that was hardest for you, or a part of the process of releasing the game that was hardest to you?
The whole thing was definitely very challenging to try to, like, and a large part of the reason for that is just because it's the first time I've ever done any of it. So it's like, I really had to learn on the job for most of this stuff. I had enough programming experience to do it. I had enough art experience to do it, music, whatever. There was still plenty of aspects of design that I just never tackled before this project, namely boss fights, cutscenes, save system, so programmatically, those were the things that I struggled with just because I had never done them before. Sloan was the first boss that I made. I think I made him back in 2021. It took me forever. And he's got pretty complicated animations, so that was part of the difficulty for that. But a boss is just a harder enemy, so like it shouldn't be that difficult, but just when you involve cutscenes and then he's got that whole thing where like he falls down, but then if you don't hit him, he gets back up or whatever. I don't know. Just at the time, it was very difficult for me to get a handle on that. And then as I made the other bosses, I got much better at it. No, I think that was the main issue that I dealt with, was just, the fact that I was figuring so much of this out for the first time as I was doing it. On the more so business side of things, nailing down a publisher for GIGASWORD was really challenging. And from what I understand, I'm not an expert on the indie industry as a whole. Really, I still consider myself a beginner at all of this, but I have a couple of other friends from the area who are developers and stuff. And from what I understand, when COVID hit, it became a bit easier to get a publisher because there was a lot of money that kind of flooded the industry and publishers and stuff like that. And then after that spike of, everybody staying home, playing all these video games and the industry has a lot of money, whatever, then there was the dip. And I think I kind of got caught in that dip trying to look for a publisher where the competition is fierce. Indie publishers can only sign so many games. I got close with a couple publishers. I made it to the interview stage. I made it to the contract stage with a few of them, but just stuff would always fall through. And they always had really kind feedback. Nobody ever told me oh, this just isn't good enough or something like that.
Right.
Pretty much everywhere that I went, I was meeting people that believed in the project. It was just, we have too many games, or we already have a game that's kind of like this or whatever. So I was getting good feedback and making good connections, but I knew that I just was never going to get this thing done without a publisher, because otherwise it just would take me way too long. It would just, if I'm working and I'm only doing it in my free time, it's just going to take forever. And plus there's the whole thing of, I wanted to get it on at least the Switch, if not the other consoles. I knew I definitely wanted it on the Switch. And yeah, just marketing, trying to just kind of get your foot in the door of this industry. It's especially when you're on your own, you need those connections, obviously, and I don't know how I would have done it, without them, to end up at PAX or to end up connected to all these people reviewing the game or streaming the game. It's you either do that or you bank on going viral somehow, which of course I was always hoping would happen with this. Maybe someday I'll just tweet something and it'll just blow up, but
not a good business plan, but would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't really factor that in as if it's going to absolutely take place. So nailing down the publisher took a long time. I'm really thankful that Akipara is who I ended up with, because they've been amazing. It just feels like I'm working with friends. We just all have connected so well and so immediately. They've absolutely been a blessing. Making games is what I've always wanted to do since I was really young. And internally, I feel I'm nobody wants to be a game developer more than me. I'm sure everybody says that, but that is how I feel. I'm I want this thing more than anybody else has ever wanted this thing in the world. Now that I've been through the whole process, start to finish, once through, there's so much that goes into this. It's so difficult. And I see why there are developers that give up after one game, or that there are just studios that pop up and then disappear forever, or that there are games that nobody ever hears about, right? It's just something that I've had on my mind since I saw it earlier this year. One of those memes where it's a timeline and it shows making a video game. And at 10%, it was this is so much fun. And then the rest of the timeline, it just said, how does any game ever get released ever? And it's that's just exactly how I feel, because I was, I would be making the cutscenes and I would get stuck. I just couldn't figure something out. And meanwhile, I've got this deadline and I've got people who are excited about the game to come out, whatever. And I've got these Kickstarter backers that I want to do right by. And I'm man, how does anyone get through this? And I know it must get easier as you go. I hope that GIGASWORD will be the hardest time I ever have making a game, but I certainly learned a lot doing this.
In my experience, your ambition will always keep reaching, which I don't know if that's heartening or not, but it is exciting.
No, for me, I know it definitely will be. I pretty much every project that I've ever got myself into, I'm all right, this is going to be the small one, and then it just explodes.
Well, from what you were talking about as projects that started or didn't quite finish, things that were pulled from, and what GIGASWORD became, it's clear that you have a great love of Zelda, and a lot of the decisions that you made for GIGASWORD were ones that were driven by seeing the sort of game that you wanted to see, which is one of those benefits of being a small studio, a solo dev. What are some of the other games that are from your past that are, I want more of this, I need more of this, or that are kind of somewhere on that to-do list?
What I quote as being my favorite game of all time is Mega Man Legends on the PS1.
Nice.
Hell yeah, let's go.
That's my ultimate nostalgia game. I love it to pieces. And as a kid, my first game idea, the first thing when I was 6 years old, the first game, the first OC I ever made, the first story I ever wrote was basically just me trying to copy Mega Man Legends. It was about this guy who was half robot and he had a gun arm and there were demons and stuff, whatever.
Solid.
So yeah, so someday it would be really cool to actually make that a real thing. Obviously update the idea now that I'm an adult and kind of go for it.
Yeah.
when you break down Mega Man Legends specifically, it's like, what kind of game is that? Like, it's pretty linear. Like, and I replay that game like every 4 years, so I'm pretty familiar with it. Like, it's pretty linear, but it allows for like just enough, like, I hesitate to say open world because that sounds too new age for what that game was, but like there's enough freedom in that game to not make it feel like you're just like, oh, I did this and now I got to go do this. It's like almost kind of like Wind Waker, where like when you break down Wind Waker, that game is a lot more linear than its presentation would suggest, right? It's got the most open map, but replaying Wind Waker, I'm like, this is a very linear Zelda game. With the ocean, like, it allows you to at least go and do like some of the secret stuff. So it's kind of like that. It's like maybe Mega Man Legends is like somewhat similar to Zelda, but just more linear. I don't know. So if I was to do that idea, basically, I don't exactly know what kind of genre specific approach I would take to it. But yeah, I love like the just lock on and strafe shooting combat. Like, I don't know, I want to do that someday. I know I do.
It's so funny, all of the ways that on the PS1 and in that console generation, they were trying to get 3D combat to work. And look, I don't know if that's the only good idea, but damn, it was a good idea.
I mean, all I'll say is there is a lot of nostalgia for that aesthetic, for sure, the PS1 aesthetic. I mean, tons of games have come out in the last couple of years that have that kind of polygonal vibe. Just saying, there's an audience for it. Also, I do love that your favorite game of all time is the one Mega Man game that's basically a Zelda game also is very funny to me. I didn't realize that when I was playing it at the time, and I loved Zelda at the time, and I loved Mega Man. I've been playing Mega Man since Mega Man 2. Looking back on it now, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's a linear Zelda game because you're going into dungeons, you're looking for treasure, solving puzzles, fighting bosses. Like, it's very much that. And man, would it be cool to have a new something like that. But it sounds like also, speaking to the design and how difficult this was, and that now you've made it through this first game, it does sound like you want to make another thing. Like, you seem heartened and excited to keep going and seeing what you can do next. But I have to imagine also there must be some satisfaction in GIGASWORD's real. It's out. I've played it and I love it. And so, like, it must be gratifying to have gotten that moment. I know as a creator, when I do a thing, I have to fight the urge to go, all right, well, let's do another thing. I have to imagine there's some of that, right? This thing is done. I'm sure there are possible patch stuff and maintenance stuff, maybe, but like, is your brain kind of already going and you have to like reel it in and like, I want to do the next thing? Are you ready to like jump to the next thing already?
Yeah, I never stop thinking of ideas. I'm definitely a creator at my core. I've got the YouTube channel, Hybrid Plays, which I haven't really touched in a few years because I've been so busy, but like, my idea for after GIGASWORD was like, oh, I'm going to finally get to do all these other things again. I'm going to get to return to YouTube. I'll get to start a new game. I recently got into Warhammer 40K, so I'm like, oh, I'll get to paint some miniatures in my spare time. Like,
That's not
that'll be cool. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You know, GIGASWORD's just been my life for the last 6 years, and then this year specifically, I've been in crunch mode, like, really the whole time, and honestly, most of last year was the same way. I am the type of person that would normally just jump right into the next thing, but I also feel like I'm so drained from how this year has gone that I need to force myself to just like, I need to take at least a month to just like not worry about what, like, I think I know what my next game is going to be, but not worry about like putting code on the screen right away and just kind of step back and like, let me just enjoy the holiday season. I'll play a couple video games, kind of reignite my inspiration, take some notes, whatever, and then if I have time to do some YouTube stuff, then I will. I'm not quite sure exactly where the majority of my focus is going to be next year. I really love the YouTube channel. I really love making videos and teaching people and featuring indie games. But when it comes to game design, like, I just always have to be working on something. It's like I just can't. Yeah, I can't stop.
You mentioned before looking forward to taking a break and playing some games, which good for you. You should do that. Are there any games you're looking forward to playing? Are there any games coming out that you're like, I can't wait to get my hands on this? Is it old stuff, new stuff? Like, what are you looking to jump in on?
I mean, there's just such a long list of indie games specifically that I just have had on my wish list forever, or that I've bought and still not played. This is another thing that surprises most people, but I've still never really played much of Hollow Knight at all. I've played the beginning. I thought it was interesting, but I really only put like 2 hours into it. So that's a game I definitely want to return to. Silk Song I should definitely play as well. One of the games that's been at the absolute top of my list has been Tunic, because that game just looks so, like, I don't think there are even any, like, not even spoken words, but I don't even know if there are like written words in that game. It's just so like, I don't want to say cryptic because that has almost a negative connotation, but it's like you just are dropped in that world and it's just like figured out. It just that I think I've played the demo for it, if there is a demo. I know I played it at a PAX in some past year. I remember thinking like all of the energy that old games have without any of the bad. It's just I'm so excited to play that game once I have a minute to sit down with it. And then obviously Metroid Prime 4, which I don't know if you guys have played it yet. I haven't. I've actually been replaying Elden Ring the last few weeks. I just had the urge.
Sure, why not?
I've been spending a lot of time with that, so I'm sure I'll pick up Metroid at some point within the next couple of days or weeks or something. But of course, that's a game that we've all been waiting for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be at least a month before this episode comes out, so we are recording this in early December. There's plenty of things that are going to be distracting for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was like, I'm buying. I only played Metroid Prime 1 for the first time with the remaster, and I've not played 2 or 3. And I was like, maybe I'll wait. And then I was like, no, I'll just buy Prime 4. The story is. I love the story, but it's kind of secondary to the experience of Metroid on some level. But now I'm trying to play a game for review. I, of course, want to finish GIGASWORD. I'm about halfway through. And so, like, I just want to spend time with these indie games. And I'm like, Metroid's not going anywhere. I'll play that in a month. It'll be fun.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the bigger games as well.
I went to my local game store to pick up a game. And I was like, maybe I want it, maybe I don't. Oh, there's a new Katamari game. That's the biggest studio game that I'm playing right now.
Yeah. It's exciting to hear that though this experience was hard and felt grueling, that you are just as fired up to keep going and do something else. I love to hear that. I'm curious just to kind of get a vibe of where you've come from. You've mentioned Mega Man Legends is your favorite game of all time. What was the first console you had? Do you remember the first video game you ever played?
Absolutely, and that actually, I mean, I have a ton of game ideas, but as for what my next game will be, I've pretty much had it narrowed down to 2 different ideas for the last like a year or so, but I think I've decided where I'm going to go with it. I don't know if I should say on this podcast in case I end up changing my mind, but so growing up, me and my older brother, we had an NES, a Sega Genesis, and a PS1. And so those are the 3 consoles that I really remember growing up with. And then when the GameCube came out, we got a GameCube. When I was really little, I would watch my brother play stuff, or he and my dad would sit and play stuff, and it was usually like Mario Bros. 2 or 3, obviously Ninja Turtles again, the Ninja Gaiden games. On Genesis, we had a game called, I think it's called Desert Strike. It's where you're the helicopter. Yes. That was one of their favorites. Road Rash was one of my favorites on the Genesis. I love that game, dude. The music is so good in Road Rash.
Yeah.
So the first video game that I ever played was when my brother and I got Game Boys. Game Boy Color was, I have it behind me. I have a green Game Boy Color on my shelf. That's the first console that was ever like mine. So the first game that I ever played and was controlling the character for was either Mario 6 Golden Coins or Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge. I don't remember which one, but I know it was one of those 2 games because when I was like, and I was probably like 4 years old at the time, like I remember sitting in the back of my mom's car playing either of those games all the time, and was nowhere near, like in Mega Man I could never beat like any bosses. I would just rotate between the 4 stages that they gave you and would just try to make progress. I was terrible at I was better at Mario, but the way I would play 6 Golden Coins is I would get through the whole game and then give my brother my Game Boy when we had to do the Wario Castle. I'm really wanting to make and again, just as a disclaimer, I don't know if this is actually what I'm going to end up doing, but I'm really wanting to make a platformer for my next game, and I'm thinking that 6 Golden Coins is going to be like my biggest comparison to draw from.
I mean, I love that. 6 Golden Coins is one of my favorite Mario games of all time, and what I love about it is, and I always forget it till I go back and play it again, there is no right way to play that game. You can do any world first and do any world in any order. And I love that. And so many platformers, especially Mario or Mario-inspired platformers, don't do that. There's like a progression, worlds, only certain stuff unlocked. And I've always loved that. It's one of the coolest looking Game Boy games. Like it basically, sprite-wise, looks like an SNES game. It's the big, readable sprites, right? Like just impressive for a Game Boy game. And has some of my favorite stuff. It made Wario one of my favorite video game characters because I just loved that weird big guy in that. He becomes a weird little guy later, but he's gigantic in that. I remember that boss battle terrifying me as a kid because he was just like this big, weird looking guy with a big mustache. Like this further proves, I think, that's in some parallel universe, Jack and I are best friends and have known each other our whole lives because we've got basically the same list of favorites.
It is funny how that works out. Yeah. And
love it.
speaking
Right.
to that, I've never really thought too much about like the sprites in that game, but now that you mention that, like they did a really good job of, despite the whole game being in 4 colors, every area feels visually different. Like that's something
Yeah.
that's really hard to pull off on a Game Boy game. But like when you're at the Halloween place, it's like all dark, and they use those colors really well to just sell that you're in like a scary house or whatever. And then I think of the micro place. I don't know if that's my
Yeah.
favorite world in that game, but I always really love those
a
levels
good one.
with like the ants and stuff. Like I don't know
mhm.
I guess probably because that's such a unique world idea. Like you get like the ocean place, and that's like okay, you see that coming, and even a Halloween place you can kind of see that coming. But like I love just like there are these levels that take place like in somebody's front yard or something. Like that's just such a cool idea.
They do a lot of fun with space. They do a lot of fun with a little. And Matt, you're absolutely right about how you can kind of go at it from any angle. So where they escalate it, you can't escalate it necessarily. You only have to do it within. It's almost like little movements. And so one of my favorite little things that was pointed out to me as an adult, that how efficiently the soundtrack works, where there are a few motifs and a few melodies that are like brilliantly adapted for each of the areas. And there again, it's wherever you start it, you're hearing the music of Mario Land 2. It's not callbacks, it's adaptation. And it's this nice, calling it a flat plane feels insulting, but that's open world.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
That's freedom.
Well, Jack, we're not going to hold it to you that your next game has to be a platformer. However, I will say, as the 2 platformer lovers on this call, speaking on behalf of Geoff, we would be very excited. But no matter what you do, I have faith that it's going to be great. I really love GIGASWORD a lot. I'm so grateful to have met you at East and to have gotten to play this game that I didn't know existed before East. I had somehow missed it, which is funny because I've backed so many games like this on Kickstarter. You can't see them all, right? But so grateful to have met you at East. So grateful to have played this game, and grateful to have had you on the show. Why don't you tell folks where they can find GIGASWORD? It's basically everywhere, but shill for the game, where they can find you online, the best way to connect about the game. Please go ahead and sell it to our audience.
So yeah, GIGASWORD it's pretty much everywhere. Steam, Epic Games Store, it's on GOG, and it's on the consoles as well. So Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch, you can find it there. And then if you want to follow me as a creator, GIGASWORD does have an official Discord server, which I will soon be, well, maybe by the time of this video, I'm not sure when I'm going to get around to doing it, but I'll be rebranding the Discord server soon to just the Studio Hybrid server. You can hop in there, you can chat with me directly. I always try to answer people's questions and stuff and just hang out. And then Hybrid Plays is the YouTube channel that I mentioned earlier, which is where I basically try to find indie hidden gems and make short little video essays just talking about their design and what makes them special, and in the meantime try to kind of teach about game design. That YouTube channel is also where if I ever have like any sort of major announcement to make, I'll always make a YouTube video. So anyone that's looking to stay updated or learn some stuff about game design, they can check out Hybrid Plays on YouTube.
Also, if you want to go somewhere to see a grown man dressed as a banana and being excited, also a great place to go.
Absolutely. And smash things with a baseball bat. Yes.
Yes.
Things you didn't know you needed until you found them.
Yes.
And now we put it to you, listener. Did you know about GIGASWORD before this episode? Didn't you hear the interview we did for PAX East? That's totally fine. We don't hold that against you. How big of a sword is too big of a sword? What is the difference between a megasword and a gigasword? I didn't say megazord, and that is a confusion point. What is the biggest sword you've ever used in a video game? Could it have been bigger? Could it have felt more weighty and deliberate? I think you need to play some GIGASWORD to find out. And if you did it feel weighty and deliberate to you? Let us know. Reach out. There's so many great ways to get in touch. We are Fun and Games Pod across all social media that we are part of, which as of this episode is Bluesky, Instagram, and Tumblr. You can email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this episode, what you thought of previous episodes, what you'd like us to talk about, and who you'd like us to talk with on future episodes. Do you have a big sword in your house? It doesn't have to be a real one. It doesn't have to be doing any sort of damage. You know what? What defines a sword? We've had the sandwich debate. Let's have the sword debate.
What's a
Show
sword?
us your biggest sword. Send that to us.
Careful. Safe search on.
Yes, this is, you know what? You're emailing it to us. Please understand that we are people on the other side of it, and we have opinions too. Thank you for that caveat. You can visit certainpov.com and find not only other fantastic Certain POV podcasts, but a permanent invite link to our Discord server, where a lot of these discussions continue. And yes, if your definition of sword does go a little unsavory, Discord will not like that, so keep that in mind. If you like what we do and want to support us, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/funandgamespod. There is a free tier, so if you just want a one-stop shop of all the things Matt and I are working on, access to the RSS feed, or to participate in the surveys that Matt and I do, like what our next console retrospective is going to be, you can do it there. But we are ever so grateful for those that are supporting us on Patreon, especially those up on the high scoreboard. Today, the high scoreboard is Alex Lavelle, Case Aiken, Daniel Nyden, Sean Bowen, Film It Yourself, Patrick Edwards, Alejandro Alves, Curly Bright, and Chris Copeline. Thank you so much for your support. Please enter your initials. You have to put the sword down to get to the letters, but you are going to need to slash the letters to enter your initials. Figure it out.
Of course, if you want a free way to support us besides joining at the free tier on the Patreon, you can, of course, rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. Any rating and review is really helpful to us. So when we are combating the mighty algorithm with a giant sword and people look for stuff about GIGASWORD, we will rise to the top like a GIGASWORD stuck in a ceiling. I don't know. Jeff's better at these than me. Please rate and review as you can. We really appreciate it. It's how we grow this audience. And come hang out in the Discord and tell us how big your sword is. No, that one didn't sound right either.
These are the things we find out as we just go off the dome. But if you are a fan and an encyclopedia of all things down slash and big swings, whether you are a fan of solo devs and indie titles, or if this is your first episode of Fun and Games, thank you so much for being here. We couldn't do this without you. This is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I am Matty K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
And Jacob McCord.
with many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Crossplay Conversations debuts on August 1st with brand new episodes hitting every other Tuesday. Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.